Hello, I'm Alexia, and let me help you to take the fear out of birth with a mix of real-life positive birth stories and birthing experts sharing their wisdom. I'll also be sharing techniques for getting into the fearless birthing mindset. And join the Fearless Momship community for bonus podcast episodes, access to free birth preparation downloads, and loads more stuff to help you to prepare for a positive birth. Join today at fearfreechildbirth.com. Hello and welcome to the Fear Free Childbirth podcast. This is me, your host, Alexia Leachman. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, if you recall from last week's episode, I opened up the series with an interview with an independent midwife, Nicky Grace. Now, I did that because independent midwives here in the UK are under attack, or at least their profession is, because it's recently been ruled that they're no longer able to practice their work because their insurance is inadequate. And therefore, if they do perform midwifery duties with a woman, then they will be struck off, which is a shocking state of affairs when it comes to women's choice. Now, we've seen in the last week how women can stand up and rise and come together, and we need to do this as well for independent midwives here in the UK, because it means so much more than just the midwives that we're talking about. It represents something so much bigger. And really, to sort of help explain and elaborate on all this, I really want to sort of share how an independent midwife can really help a woman to turn around and experience a previous birth experience that she may have had that may have been a difficult one, a traumatic one, and how those women do need additional support. They need more than they are usually able to receive in a normal healthcare system. And to help me show all that and really illustrate this beautifully is my guest today, Hannah Palamara. Now, Hannah is also a birth photographer and a doula. So today we are going to hear about birth stories. She had C-sections and an amazing VBAC, but also her journey as a doula and a birth photographer. And we're going to talk about birth photography as well. So there is so much to share and for you to listen to in today's episode. But before I dive into that, I just want to give a little bit of an update. Now, if you recall, last week I announced that I was opening up a free members area on the Fear Free Childbirth website. And this free members area is where you can get hold of all the free resources that I share as part of the podcast. So you'll know that from many of my episodes, you can get little freebies that go with certain episodes. So I've made it super easy now where you can get them all in one place. So you just sign up, join the members area, and there they all are, waiting for you to download. Now, there is going to be a paid level of membership where there will be loads more content that you can get in the free level. There's going to be additional podcast episodes. There's going to be mini series. There's going to be mini courses, things to help you on mindset, boosting your birth confidence, all sorts of things like that. Now, it's not ready yet because I'm still busy creating it behind the scenes. But what you can do is join the waiting list. If you're on the waiting list, you will be able to get extra bonuses when you join that normal public people, i.e. people that don't join the waiting list, won't be able to get. And you'll also get a discount on the fee to be in the membership. So if you want to be in the paid level, or at least you're interested and you want to know all the juicy details, then you need to join the waiting list. You can join the waiting list really easily just by simply joining the free level membership, and then you will receive an email where you can choose to click a link to join the waiting list. It's really simple. So you can do that at a homepage at fearfreechildbirth.com. If you're in the US, I've made it super easy. You can simply send a text to 44499 and you just send my name, Alexia, Alexia. Just send that to 44499 and you'll be automatically added and you will receive an email to confirm that you want to join the free member area, and then you'll receive the email and you can click if you want to join the waiting list. It's all really, really easy. So that is what you need to do if you want to get more support, basically, to help you to claim your positive birth and to really manage your mindset, clear your fears, and learn everything that you can about birth so that you feel empowered, informed, and that you have everything that you need to feel in control of your birth. So anyway, that is it. Now I'm going to hand over in a minute to the chat that I have with Hannah. Now, it's amazing. There's so much to learn from this conversation with Hannah, because she had she's got 3 little ones, and her first 2 births were C-sections, and they weren't pleasant for her. They were very, very difficult. So as part of our conversation, we talk about, what led to her having those C-sections, how she overcame her birth trauma. So she talks about birth trauma debriefing, some of the things that she used to sort of heal herself, how she then made the decision to want to hire an independent midwife, and why she chose to do that. And so this, I think, is really important for us to really better understand the the real importance for people like independent midwives, especially here in the UK, but certainly everywhere, that women that can support other women in their birth choices, that can help them to have amazing births, and the impact of not having an amazing birth and how that can really ripple across the whole family unit. So, she really goes into a lot of depth about that. And also we talk about the importance of knowledge is power. I've just talked about, if you want to join my members area, where there's going to be so much extra stuff for you to learn. And she really reiterates the point that having knowledge about birth, doing your research, is really, really important and can only help you when it comes to preparing for your birth. But of course, we talk about birth photography as well, and the importance of having a photographer at your birth. So there's so much here. I'm not going to say anything more. I'm just going to hand over the time that I spoke to Hannah all about birth, C-sections, VBACs, birth photography, independent midwives, you name it. Enjoy the chat. Okay. Well, hello, Hannah, and welcome to the Fear-Free Childbirth podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, Hannah, you do so much good stuff, so I'm not even going to try and describe what you do. So just first of all, if you just tell my listeners a little bit more about the work that you do.
Okay, I am a birth doula and also a photographer who specialises in birth. And I work with women and couples as a doula, and I'm also working as a birth photographer at the moment around London and Kent, and trying to get the profile of birth photography known up in the UK.
Because birth photography is a little bit underrated, or it's just not really considered enough, is it, by pregnant women?
Yeah, it's quite under the radar still in the UK. It's really well known in the US, and a lot of people have a birth photographer, but here people still seem to have a bit of a strange reaction when I tell them what I do. And what I always tell them, it's very much about the story of their birth, which is something amazing. And most women will want photos or want some kind of memory of their birth. So having a professional there to record it, I think, is something really amazing.
I know one of my biggest regrets is not having my birth photographed. And even though I was clued up to the beauty of birth after my first amazing birth, I still didn't get anyone there for my second. And I really regret that. So, yeah. It's really, really important moment to capture, isn't it?
It is. It's extremely important. As I was saying before, people, they invest a lot in their weddings, but then they don't think so much about what about having your birth recorded as well.
No, I know. Now, so how did you, we're going to talk more about birth photography later, but I'm just really curious as to how you got into, well, I suppose the birth thing as well, but, birthing, doulaing, but the photography as well. Tell me a little bit about your journey to all of this.
It really started with the birth of my 3 children, because I'm a mother of 3 children, and I had 3 very different birth experiences. I had 2 C-sections, and then I had an amazing home birth with my son, and it was a long and painful journey to get there, but it kind of brought me to where I am as a birth worker, and I just started doulaing and holding space for women as soon as my son was born, almost 3 years ago now, and I then kind of did my doula training and just hit the ground running, really.
So would you mind talking a little bit more about your birth and that your birth journey? So
sure.
Tell me a little bit more about your C-sections. How was that for you?
My first one, I was quite young, and I just assumed that, I would have a water birth, have a natural birth, and that I wanted to avoid an epidural. And as is quite common with first babies, I had quite a long first stage of labour. It was 3 days. And when I went into hospital, I ended up having my waters broken at 7 centimetres for no reason apart from that they wanted to speed things up a little bit. And I, being kind of just thinking that was fine, I had no idea that there were any risks to it. I agreed, and then I ended up with the baby going into bradycardia. The baby's heart rate dipped right down, and it was just very traumatic, and I ended up kind of being thrown on a trolley and having a C-section under general anaesthetic. And I felt very powerless. I was absolutely terrified. I thought I was in fear for my own life and for my baby's, and it was just very, very scary. It was so the opposite of what I imagined my birth would be. And it really, really stuck with me for a long time. And I was not offered sort of a debrief afterwards, and I wasn't ever really given an exact reason why it happened. So from what some doctors or midwives may have told me in the 5 days I was in hospital, was my pelvis was probably too small. My baby had got stuck, and one of us had nearly died. And so I was left with that. And I definitely had postnatal depression. And later on, I found out that I had PTSD vividly as well, because I would have flashbacks, and I wouldn't be able to think about it without sort of crying or just feeling extremely sad and feeling like a failure. I felt like my body had failed me. And I think that impacted me very much as a young woman as well, and as a mother as well. You know, it was the one kind of thing that I felt like I really wanted to do, and I was told, you know, it probably wasn't possible. So that was really hard. And then when I fell pregnant with my second baby, quite a few years later, at first I thought that I would have to have a planned C-section because my pelvis was too small, but they said I could try to have a VBAC. So what I did was I did everything I could to prepare for this VBAC externally. So as in, I did a lot of amazing yoga. I ate really healthily. I followed a method to keep me really healthy. But I didn't do any emotional preparation for this birth. And I realized now I hadn't debriefed and let go of my first birth experience. And so I went past my guest date with that baby, and they wanted to give me sweeps from 39 weeks, which I agreed to because I thought that's just what you did. And on the final sweep, the midwife said to me, "Oh, you know, your vaginal arch is really narrow." She's like, "I just don't know if a baby's going to get through there." And this was at sort of, you know, almost 41 weeks, that, you know, dying, really wanting to have this birth. And it was, now I look back and I can't believe a midwife said that to me. You know, what kind of belief does that say to me about my own body when I'm about to give birth? So that had a knock-on effect for me. And when I went into labour with that baby, it started very quickly and intensely. And I was absolutely petrified. I was so frightened. And me and my husband went straight to hospital because they told us that's what we should do, because I was a VBAC, and got to hospital. And I had a doula type person booked, but she wasn't there yet. And before she got there, I asked for an epidural because they told me I was 2 centimetres, and I assumed it would be 3 days of being at 2 centimetres with that intense surges. And I was up here, you know, I was so terrified. So I just asked for that epidural. And then it was 18 hours lying on my back, couldn't mobilise, and they said the baby was in a funny position, and I got to 9.5 centimetres, which is where I got to with my first baby, and they said, "Oh, you're really tired, the baby's tired, you know, let's do a C-section." And by that point I was exhausted, and so I agreed to the C-section. I wish I'd turned my epidural off and mobilised, but that's hindsight. And that C-section was not traumatic, as in I was awake, you know, I got to have skin to skin with my baby. I had really great bonding and breastfeeding with her, but I felt extremely removed from the birth process. I didn't feel like I'd given birth. And I was very, very sad again. And a doctor came to me in recovery and said, "You shouldn't try again to have a vaginal birth because your pelvis is just too small, and the same thing will happen." Goodness. So again, I was left feeling that my body was a failure. My body couldn't give birth. And that again impacted me hugely emotionally. But luckily, it didn't affect, I don't think it affected my bonding with that baby. And I don't think I had depression, you know, it was really great, actually, the experience I had breastfeeding and bonding with her. But as a woman, it definitely has an effect on me. A few years later, I fell pregnant again with my third baby, and which was kind of a surprise, but I knew there was another baby in me, and secretly I knew that I wanted to try and have this birth. So I immediately said, right, I'll have to have a repeat C-section because that's what I was told. And then this little voice in my head, it just kept saying to me, you've got to try. So I started researching. And I did so much research. I think I researched every day of that whole pregnancy. And what I discovered was that, you know, having a third C-section was actually there's a lot more risks to that than having a vaginal birth, even after 2 C-sections. The biggest risk is scar rupture, which even after 2 or more C-sections is still below 1%. It's like it's about 0.8, they say, but, you know, those statistics. And then, of course, I had to convince my husband. because he was also traumatized from my previous birth, and he just wanted to do what the doctors said. And with this pregnancy, we went for a private scan quite early just to see if everything was okay, and a private doctor who had never seen my notes and didn't know my history, my husband said, do you think she could have a vaginal birth, a VBAC? And he was like, there's a massive risk of scar rupture. I think he quoted 80%. He definitely quoted a percentage that was a lie, that was completely untrue. But that, of course, and I knew it was not true because I'd been doing my research, but it left my husband saying, why are you even going to try this? You're crazy, you're putting your life at risk. And so a large part of that pregnancy was spent trying to educate my husband as well. I was with the NHS, but my consultant appointments were kind of very disempowering. They recommended a repeat C-section based on my previous births, and when I told them I wanted to have a VBAC, they said, well, we'll have to do this and we'll have to do this, and if this doctor's on duty, we can't guarantee that they will be okay and allow you to have these things that you want on your birth plan. And I just felt, this was my last chance, I felt like, and I needed to have this birth. So I employed an independent midwife around 32 weeks. And at first I was thinking hospital birth still, but then at my final consultant appointment, it felt like it was a fight. It felt like it was me and my midwife against the head of midwifery and the consultant at the hospital. And I just felt that they didn't believe in me and that they wouldn't support me. So I then decided on a home birth. And I decided on it because I actually felt that I would be safest to have intervention-free vaginal birth at home, not because, it was because I didn't feel supported in hospital, but I actually did feel safer at home, if that makes sense. And with that baby, I went to 42 weeks, so putting me even more high risk. And I felt great at that point because my midwife believed in me, and I think that was a turning point for me. When she said to me, I believe in you, just those words, I then started to really believe in myself and my ability to give birth. And I had done a huge amount of debriefing prior to this as well of my other two births, and I'd worked on it a lot in that pregnancy as well. And on my day of 42 plus 1, I was pottering around the shops, and I had a phone call from a family friend who's a doctor, and she proceeded to tell me that maybe it was time for me to just give in and have a C-section, and that my baby had a choice too. And this conversation, I was extremely vulnerable. I'd been having what's called prodromal labour, or on and off surges for quite a few weeks, and that conversation just left me again feeling like, someone didn't believe in me. Again, I was having to fight for this birth. And so I just sat in my car and I absolutely sobbed my eyes out and just couldn't understand why no one would believe in me. So I believed in me. And I think that release that I had that day definitely helped, because I did go into labour not that night, but the day after in the evening. With a few natural remedies used as well. But I think having that massive release that I had of emotions was, even though it was a shame it was brought on that way, it was quite therapeutic. So I went on, and I went into labour the following night on the full moon, and I had a very fast labour. It came on and immediately was surges every 2 minutes, and in total it was 4 hours, and I had a beautiful water birth, and it was absolute. I just can't even put into words. It still makes me so emotional today, because it just changed everything. Changed everything. And I gave that to my baby. I was able to give him that gift. So it was amazing. I did have a few complications. I had a postpartum hemorrhage and I had to transfer, which is, the part of the story that it's a shame, but I'm able to separate that from, the amazing birth that I did have. So yeah.
Amazing.
Sorry, I can't tell that story quickly.
No. It's just beautiful. I'm just fighting back tears here because it's just such a beautiful story, and I can really, I just really felt that journey. I really felt that, and I'm just really interested. You said you did a lot of work in your third pregnancy to prepare, and the inner work, and I'd just really love to know a little bit more about that. Like, what did you do to overcome those first two births?
Yeah, So before I was pregnant with my third baby, without realizing, I had myself been debriefing and working on the trauma. And so what I did was when I was ready to, and after my first birth, I think it took me, let me think, at least 2 or 3 years to even be able to write my story. And so writing my story was one of the biggest parts of debriefing it. And I also did, without realizing it, I did birth art. So after my second baby, I just did a lot of drawings of pregnant women in labour, and I did free writing on those drawings, which was it kind of was explanatory of, you know, of what I had been through and what I was feeling like a failure. And actually a large part of my course that I studied, I did fashion media communication, and there was a lot of creatively, a lot of my story came out in my work, which was amazing, and which my teacher loved as well. And it wasn't necessarily completely obvious that's what it was, but to me, you know, I could see, and especially looking back, what it was. I also see an amazing therapist, and we do work together. We do something called inner work, which it's almost impossible to explain how it works. And if I taught it myself, I can only explain it as being a little bit like hypnotherapy, but you're not hypnotized. You kind of go back to past experiences, and it's really, I can't explain it, but it changed my life working with this guy. And I also joined a lot of support groups in my third pregnancy, specifically ones like VBAC Support Group UK, an American home birth one. And I found that sharing stories is massively powerful. So being able to debrief my stories to people and then reading positive stories was huge. I mean, when I started, the whole thing that started making me realize I could have a VBAC after 2 C-sections was reading all these stories of women who'd had VBACs after 2, 3, 4, 5 C-sections. And you know, it wasn't just the one here and there. There's hundreds of stories like that. But the key that I found in every story was that avoiding intervention is one of the biggest parts of being able to have this birth, just like birth as normal. Avoid other birth, uncomplicated birth. Avoiding interventions is, you know, the best way to have a natural birth.
So that's why you decided to go and have one at home.
Yeah, so that's why I decided to be at home, because there wouldn't be, you know, time limit. There wouldn't necessarily be a time limit. I didn't have to have vaginal examinations, which was very important to me. I didn't want, you know, a consultant coming in and putting their fear onto me. I didn't want anybody in the room who could possibly be holding any fear or any disbelief in me, because I knew that I could pick up on that energetically and it could affect me being able to birth.
So did you get to the bottom of whether or not your pelvic area is too narrow, or was that, because I can't believe you were hearing that. Like, was that completely blown out the water, or do you have a very narrow pelvic area?
Oh my gosh, I'm really excited to share about that, because I completely blew that out of the water. My baby was not what I would call a big baby, but he was 8 pounds 12 and a half, so nearly 9 pounds. Yeah. But also he was asynclitic, which means that his head was like this. Oh, right. So I actually pushed out a much wider diameter than if your baby had their head like this.
Oh, she's leaning forward, yeah, because I can't see you when they're listening. So I'm just saying, on the first time you said he came out with the head on the side, whereas normally they come out with their head tilted forward. Okay. Yeah,
I pushed out a much wider diameter. So I did push for just over 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours, and also I had no experience of pushing, but now when I speak to other people, I realised that I had the spontaneous urge to push, but I did push really, really hard at the end, and I had to, and I had to go from kneeling to squatting to open up the pelvis and to get that baby down. I think that there's anything wrong with my pelvis, obviously. But I do think, you know, anybody with an asynclitic baby, if they're in hospital, a lot of women can end up with instrumental deliveries or C-sections, because it's very difficult to move a baby down that's in that position sometimes. And, you know, I felt it. It was a real struggle, but that baby was coming out of my vagina.
Yeah. Brilliant. No, I know. And the other thing that women hear a lot is the big baby thing. Oh, your baby's too big. You know, your body can't do this. And I just can't believe that women are hearing things like that from the people that are meant to be caring for them. You know, it just makes me so mad.
really makes me angry as well. And I was talking with a midwife friend about it the other day, because small women can birth really big babies. And, you know, we grow babies that can fit through our pelvises. And I think one of the biggest issues women have with delivering babies is their own positions, you know, because if they're lying flat on their back in lithotomy position, their pelvic outlet is so much smaller. And also, I feel very strongly about how we as birth professionals, doulas, midwives and women talk about the size of babies, because when we tell somebody, oh, that's a big baby, we're putting that seed into their mind, and then they start to question their own ability to give birth. And I think that is very, very powerful. Like the language we use, it affects women so much. And that was my experience, being told that, you know, it had a profound effect on me, not just as a mother, as a woman. So yeah, I could rant about that all day.
Well, we might rant in a bit. I'm just curious now, so at what point during this journey through your birth did you decide to want to be a doula then? When did that come along? Was that after your final birth?
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in birth. I come from a family of medical professionals, nurses and doctors, and I always wanted to do midwifery. After my second baby, I did actually apply to do midwifery, and I got onto a course, but I decided not to because I wanted to be at home with my children. So the fascination with birth has always been there, but I never really considered being a doula. And it was after the birth of my son, my last baby, that I actually immediately set up support groups for women who'd had previous C-sections, and I started doulaing without even realising. And then it literally it happened so organically. That's what I love about everything that I've done, has happened organically. I just kind of started doing it.
Yeah. So where did the photography stuff come in then? How did that get introduced into your work? I mean, it sounds like you're very creative anyway. You did fashion communication, and then you were drawing and writing. So yeah. There's a lot of creativity within you already. So, but I'm just, you know, were you a photographer already? Was that something that you were good at already, or did you just suddenly decide to start taking photos?
I was already, so I did photography as part of my fashion course, although I wasn't that interested in it then. And it was after the birth of my second child that I picked up a camera and started photographing my children. And so I was already a photographer doing kind of family work when I fell pregnant with my son. And it was then after I had him that it just made sense to start focusing on birth as a photographer, and it really changed my direction as well, and it kind of showed me what it is that I'm really interested in, which is birth.
Yeah. So how's that journey been for you doing birth photography? How have you I suppose attending births when you're maybe attending from a slightly different perspective to maybe the doula, or I don't know, do you get hired to do both, or
I do. Yes, it started off doing both, and I have done both a lot, and I think it's obviously a little bit easier when I'm just the birth photographer, because then I take a step back and I'm literally viewing and recording, very quietly in the background, which is amazing because I can also just focus on doing that. But I also love to do both because I love, being a doula and supporting that couple. And then there's always time to pick up my camera and to document it at the same time. I feel like as a birth photographer, it's extremely important. You don't have to be a doula or a midwife, but I do think you have to have the essence of a birth worker. Any photographer can decide they want to do birth, but I think to actually be successful in birth photography, you need to understand how the physiology of birth works, how the birth space works, and obviously how the system works in the UK. I think it's really important, to be able to be a professional, like being able to know how to speak to other birth professionals and how to respect, your couple's birth space and what to do when things don't always go to plan, as they often don't.
When you're talking to women that are preparing for their birth, I'm just curious, because I really wish, I said this at the beginning, I really wish I'd had my births photographed. And I'm just wondering, I'm curious as to what point in pregnancy do women typically engage with you and say, hey, I want you there at my birth? I mean, is it a last minute thing? Does some of them getting in touch right from, they're in their first trimester, they want to book you? How does it work? I mean, how do you find that people are coming into contact with you in that way?
Yeah, so it's really different with every couple that I meet, because some couples I meet them quite early on, and then we work together throughout the pregnancy, and then some later. I think I probably get taken on a lot later, more commonly as a photographer. And I think that's also because birth photography is still under the radar here, and it's not well known. And I think that's why it needs to be kind of out there more, and people know that it's available and what it really entails, so that when people get pregnant, they're like, I want a birth photographer. You know, I want this for my birth. This is important for me.
Yeah. No, I know. And it's funny, we talk about wedding photographers before we started recording, and how so many people, the wedding photographer is always in the wedding budget. You wouldn't dream of having a wedding without having a wedding photographer. And yet, birth in so many ways is so much more important than the wedding. You could have several weddings in your life. You could cut the dress on again and reshoot, but you're never ever going to be able to do that birth thing again with that little baby, are you? And it's just so important.
Absolutely. And people invest a huge amount of money in prams and cots and other baby things, high chairs, that can cost hundreds, thousands of pounds. And so investing in your birth, it's something that everyone should do. I also think another part of birth photography that's really important is that, the images we see of birth in the media today, it changes our view on birth. And I think if we can have more images of, normal birth, in inverted commas, of real birth out there, of positive birth stories, of real birth stories, I think that can help to change the perception of birth that we have in this country and globally as well. I think we're lucky we are receiving a lot of images of birth photography from the US, but as we know, the system in the US is very different to how it is here. Beautiful home births do happen. There is midwifery care, but there's a lot of obstetrician-led care, and there's a lot of women, lying on their backs with the doctor delivering their baby for them. Whereas here in the UK, we're midwife-led. We're so lucky that we do have the option to have home birth whenever we want. Birth centre, and then in hospital, but more or less hands off most of the time. So I think, being able to get those images and have them out there in the media, I think it's really important. And, I was just banned from Facebook for 24 hours because I posted images of a beautiful breech vaginal birth. And, I made a point of, when I was back on, posting a very, not graphic, but an image of a baby coming out of a vagina, one of my birth photography images, and saying, I'm not going to stop sharing. I won't stop sharing these images of real birth, because there are very sexually explicit images out there on Facebook which don't get removed, which are not appropriate for children. But these birth images are getting removed as being sexually explicit or nudity, and it's completely wrong.
No, I saw your little Facebook rant, and I completely agree with you. It is just completely, it is wrong that we're, again, the whole breastfeeding thing, touches on the similar kind of issue about how we're sexualizing images of breasts, and yet we can't. People are complaining about breastfeeding images. It's just it's a crazy world we're living in. So I'm sure that we'll be sharing all your links and everything, and I hope that you get a lot of support from podcast listeners, sort of helping you fly the flag and raise the profile of normal birth, and a photographer is just such an important role in that to help get the message out there. Because I completely agree, the whole way that the media portray birth is so damaging to women, how they think it's on their back. You always see a woman, like when I've been looking for images with some of the work that I do, and you always just see a woman frowning, screaming, that kind of really painful pose as she's lying on her back surrounded by doctors, and that's the kind of archetypal image that we have in our minds about what birth is like, isn't it? She's wearing scrubs, she's on a bed surrounded by men looking at her what's it, and no wonder women have got fear of birth when they think it's like that. My births were nothing like that. I mean, I'd had a midwife in the corner knitting. I was just kind of crouched over my sofa, breathing loudly, there's not a doctor in sight, and we need to see more images like that. So I really support what you're trying to do. It's really, really important. So what would you say to somebody who really hadn't thought that photography for birth was something that she should consider? Like, if you had to sort of, persuade a pregnant mum to do that, what would you say to her?
You put me on the spot.
I'll take your time.
I would say that it is the most important day of your life, whether it's your first or your fifth baby. And no matter how your story goes, having it documented in images is something that you will never, ever forget, and you will never regret. I have precious images, not professional, from my last birth. and I have a video, and they're my absolute most treasured things. And being able to look back at them and see, you know, the beauty of what happened, to remember how strong I was, to remember every minute, to see how supportive my husband was, remembering all those things, because you do forget. You forget the little tiny details, and that is exactly what a photographer gives to you. She gives you those details that can actually be completely missed sometimes.
And then I've got a photo after my first birth that was caught quickly, and it was just my little one with skin crawling up, so literally quite soon after she came out, and the look on my face of pure, like the biggest smile that I couldn't recreate. It was so real, and so showed how amazing I felt in that moment, that I always look back at that with, I'm connected immediately to that moment, and I just wish it wasn't this grainy, badly taken shot, because my other half's terrible at taking photos, and I wish it had been a really well taken photo with, you know, with a good lens and all the rest of it. So one of my biggest regrets, and I just would urge anyone who's pregnant listening to just get a damn photographer at your birth, because you will not regret it. It's definitely one of the things to do. And I'm just curious now, I wouldn't mind taking you back to a little bit when you talked about the inner work, but also when we talk about the role of fear, and how, you know, by taking these great photos and by changing how women think about birth, and given that you're present in so many births, how you think that we can really change birth and women's experience of birth, and how it's important to get fear out of that birth room, how your fears were affecting you in your births, and how you have got a direct experience of that playing out, and how different it was once you'd done the inner work in your final birth. You know what I mean? So having had the two different experiences that you've had, how you know how fear affects you in birth, and how important it is to try and do that work that you did finally for your third.
Yes, I think it was hugely important. You know, it was absolutely, it had to happen, I think, because I don't know if things would have gone the same way if I hadn't worked on all of that stuff. And I think everybody has stuff, in inverted commas, whether it's from previous births or life experiences. And I do think the thing is that it also takes a lot of courage. You have to have courage to be able to want to go back and work on that stuff. And that's not easy. You know, things bubble up, and it's painful. It's really painful. And, you know, I went through a lot of pain when I was writing my stories. You know, I did a lot of writing when I was talking to people. But it was so important, and it was important for my births, obviously, which was life-changing, but it was also important for me as a woman, as a mother, to work on that stuff, because it has changed how I am, because what I'm doing is I'm getting rid of all that stuff. You know, I'm healing those experiences, and then they don't affect me as a person so much in my everyday life, because the stuff we carry around does affect us whether we realise it or not.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of women listening to this podcast that have had those difficult first births, or a C-section that didn't go, you know, where they felt robbed of their home birth or natural birth. You did a lot of work, and you talked about the inner work, and you talked about journaling, you talked about birth art. Is that pretty much what you did, or is there anything else that you didn't mention that might be useful for women listening to go and check out ways that they could heal their own births?
I think it is important, especially if you've, you know, suffered severe birth trauma or PTSD, to find a professional to speak to, the right one for you. I think that was hugely important for me. And then the writing was very important, and then being able to read that to somebody else, or have them read my stories, and then, you know, debrief it with me. But I'm just trying to remember that, you know, the birth art, and then having a community of support that I could reach out to. So Facebook groups, you know, that was massive, having that as well.
Thank you. And I just wondered if there's anything else that, you know, given what we've talked about today, is there anything else that you'd like to share if there's a pregnant woman listening, to help her to have the most amazing birth? Then, you know, now that you've been working as a doula, you've witnessed a lot of things, you've had your own experiences. Is there anything else you'd like to say to women to try and improve their chances, stack the odds in their favour of having the most positive, incredible birth?
I think knowledge is power. This is something that I learned massively. It would be wonderful if we could go into our birth experiences and not have to do any reading or any research and just trust in our healthcare providers. But unfortunately, because of the way society is, because of the way healthcare is, we do need to be informed. So knowledge is power. Go out there and do your research. Find positive stories. Find out what your route of care is. Research doulas. You know, having birth support, a doula with you is massive. It's been proven that it can lower the chances of interventions of C-section. They also support your husband. You know, they're not just there for you. So do your research. And I'm a big advocate for hypnobirthing. I think that a lot of the couples I work with find hypnobirthing hugely helpful to them, especially if they've suffered trauma before or if they have any fear around birth, which a lot of people do. And then I would just say, trust your instincts and believe in yourself. I say every client that I work with, I say, I believe in you. And sometimes it sounds really stupid and they sort of cringe and it sounds cringy when I say it. But when somebody says that to you, it goes in, because this is what happened to me, and you start to believe it yourself. And I've had women say to me, I love you, because I've said to them, I believe in you. So I think, you know, having a team around you that believes in you and believing in yourself. And if there's something you really, really want and you believe, then you fight for it. And, you know, we shouldn't have to, but sometimes you do need to fight for that birth, and it's worth it.
Well, thank you so much, Hannah, for coming on and sharing your story. It's just been lovely. And I have been fighting tears at times because it is such a beautiful story.
Yeah, it was such an honour. I love to meet you and to speak with you. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much for coming on the show. And now, so if you want to find out more about your work, especially those in the UK, but I'm sure some people in the US might want to fly you out for their birth. You never know.
That would be happening, actually.
Yeah.
I do.
So where can people find you online, on Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff?
Yeah, sure. So my website is www.treeoflifedoulaphotography.com. I'm on Twitter. I'm not great on Twitter, but I'm at Love Tree of Life on Twitter. That's my Twitter handle. Okay. My Facebook is at Tree of Life Doula Photography, and you can usually find my most recent photography work on there.
Well, thank you so much, and I'll be sharing all those links in the podcast show notes, and maybe a pic or two of the kind of stuff that you do, so that people can see what you do. So thank you once again, Hannah, for joining me on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Now, since having my chat with Hannah has received some amazing news. Now, in the 2017 Birth Photography competition, Hannah has received an honourable mention. Now, if you haven't seen any pictures going around on your Facebook feed, I would urge you to check it out, because there are some amazing photographs of birth being captured by these photographers. And the thing is, birth photography is huge in the US, as Hannah mentioned, but here in the UK it really isn't very well known, and not many women choose to have their births photographed. But I would just urge you to check out some of the images on the website of the International Association of Birth Photographers, because there really are some amazing, powerful images. But you will see Hannah's image there getting an honourable mention. It really is a gorgeous picture of a little baby just coming up through the water, and just such a cute, the face is just in there. It just makes me want to cry looking at it. Really do go and check it out. So Hannah really is leading the way here in the UK for birth photographers, and I really wish her all the best in helping to really fly the flag for UK birth photographers. So anyway, do check that stuff out. The link is at birthphotographyImageCompetition.com, and you can check all those things out there. I hope that today's interview was interesting, informative, helpful, and above all, that you enjoyed it. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now. You've just been listening to me, Alexia Leachman, here on the Fear-Free Childbirth podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now, this is just a wee reminder that if you'd like to listen to bonus podcast episodes and have access to loads of birth preparation downloads, my video mini-series on reducing your fears, and so much more, then join the Fearless Mummership community today. You can join at fearfreechildbirth.com. Until next time, bye for now.